What is up, world? It's your boy Ton, and you are listening to the Wonton Wealth Podcast. Here, I'm going to unravel anything and everything commercial real estate related. And more importantly, we're going to add abundant value. So if you're ready, buckle up your eardrums. What's up, guys? Today, we are going to get our hands dirty. Literally. We're going to be talking about environmental reports and why they're so necessary in property assessments. So you're going to want to buckle up because this is going to be a wild ride through the world of soil, water, and regulations. So we're going to kick things off with the basics. Environmental reports are a big deal when it comes to property assessments. You're going to want to think of them as the health checkup for your potential investment or property. These reports spot potential issues like contaminated soil or compromised groundwater. Trust me, these problems are not just annoying, they're going to turn a prime piece of real estate into a fucking money pit. We're talking about making a property unsuitable for its intended use and racking up super large, expensive fixes. Plus, the time that it's going to take to sort these issues out is a super buzzkill. So what do these reports do? They give investors, developers, and owners pretty much the lowdown on a property's environmental health. It's not just about them, though. It's about keeping the neighborhood happy and protecting those long-term investments. Because we should care about the environment too, right? Now, let's dig a little bit deeper. Environmental reports are the go-to tools for anyone serious about making real estate ventures sustainable. When you bring in the pros who know their way around these environmental assessments, it's an absolute game changer. We're looking at reducing risks, maximizing a property's potential, and keeping the planet happy for future generations, like your next buyer perhaps. So environmental studies come in essentially three different flavors. You got phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. And after these studies are done, they provide you with a report, which are subsequently called phase 1 reports, phase 2 reports, and phase 3 reports. So first, we're going to talk about phase 1 reports. Phase 1 reports are a shorthand for what it's actually called. They're actually called phase 1 environmental site assessments, or ESAs. But I'm going to use reports because it's fucking shorter and it's easier to say. So in this report or this study, you're going to be hiring a detective to check out the property's past and its present. The main goal of this is to find out if anything that's happened there before or is happening right now have affected the soil or the groundwater. Because if there are any environmental issues, they could actually cause problems and health hazards. So in essence, this assessment is so crucial because it uncovers any environmental problems, and it's not just a concern for the property owner, it's also a worry for the lenders. And once again, we want to keep the neighborhood happy as well. These issues can seriously impact the property's value. If there's a problem with the property, once again, it's going to take a long time to actually fix it and or render the property unusable for certain things. And that's why a phase 1 report is so important. It makes sure that everyone involved in a real estate deal knows about any of the potential risks. This way, everyone's interests are protected and the transaction can move forward and hopefully not backwards with all the necessary information in hand. And it's all about keeping everyone in the loop and ensuring that the process of purchase is smooth. So in a phase 1 report, let's dig deeper into the elements that goes into it. Like we've mentioned before, we're going to have some expert dude come in and pretty much do all these tests. So that's the site visit. The guy's going to come in, he's going to observe the property's current and past conditions and even look at the neighboring properties. The on-site investigation here is going to allow the environmental professional to gain valuable insights into any potential environmental risks. Then they're going to go back, they're going to dig into federal, state, tribal, and local databases to uncover key details about, if there's any underground storage tanks or above ground storage tanks, any potential releases, and how hazardous stuff is stored and or disposed of. They're also going to dive into the past. And how they do that is they're going to be using historical aerial photos. They're going to be using Sanborn maps, which are like fire insurance maps, city directories, topographic maps. They're going to be flipping through the entire history of the property, like a property time capsule. And these resources are going to give them the information about what used to be there, and it can possibly uncover any environmental secrets in its history. Then they're also going to be working with state environmental agencies, the building departments. They're going to be working with the fire departments and even the health department to look for access of important records and documents that can give them any information about the property in general. They're also going to be doing some interviews with current and past owners, operators, and pretty much anyone who knows the property's history. It's like getting the juicy details straight from the horse's mouth. Then they're actually going to also interview with the report user, and in this case, it's probably going to be you. These pros are going to cover things like checking if there are any environmental liens or limitations on the property. They're going to get insights based on the user's experience and finding out why that person or you is getting a phase 1 report. And once again, when I say, the pros or these professional dudes, what I mean is an environmental professional or an EP. And the EP is the person that's going to be evaluating and gathering all this research and all the findings and going to package it up in a nice report for you. Their main thing is, they're going to be checking out if the property has ever hosted operations with risky stuff like risky chemicals or risky gases. And when I say that, I want you to think, dry cleaners or manufacturing spots or gas stations. These guys aren't just looking at the soil and the water. They're also looking at any other data out there that could potentially throw off some sneaky vapors that could affect the whole environment or the neighborhood nearby. And just a side note, you're probably wondering who regulates all this stuff. And the organization that kind of puts out all the standards is ASTM. They're like the quality police. They set the standards for a bunch of stuff around the world just to make sure we're all healthy. And ASTM stands for the American Society for Testing and Materials. Once again, they're like the quality gurus. They lay down the law when it comes to the technical requirements for all sorts of things, from materials and products to systems and services. They essentially make the rule book for the quality game. When we're looking at phase 1 reports, the ASTM says certain things are a must, but there's also room to dig deeper. Things like asbestos, lead paint, mold, lead in water, and radon aren't always on the standard ASTM checklist, but if you want them in your report, you can actually request for them. So after the phase 1 report or environmental site assessment wraps up, professional dude is going to give us a breakdown. They're going to summarize what they found. They're going to drop some recommendations for what needs fixing or if it's a historical piece, etc. Now, in their terminology, there are some conditions that you want to keep in mind. They're going to give you a few acronyms, right? So the first acronym, and probably the most important acronym, is REC, which stands for Recognized Environmental Condition. It means that there are known or potential contamination on site or maybe from nearby. Now, secondly, you have a CREC, which is a Controlled Recognized Environmental Condition, which means the property's been dealt with, but there are still some residue, especially if you plan to revamp the property for whatever reason. And then another one, or another acronym, is HREC, which means that there is a past issue that's been cleaned up and it's been given the green light for unrestricted use. If you happen to have an REC, it usually means that you'll have to get a phase 2 environmental site assessment, ESA, or phase 2 report. or a phase 2 study. And a phase 2 study has more detailed investigations and sampling to dig deeper into the assessment and characterization of potential environmental risks. The process for phase 1 usually takes about 2 weeks or so. However, in many cases, the review of reports can extend over several weeks. On average, the total time can take probably 2 to 4 weeks, and you're paying a few $1,000s for this. But back to the phase 2 reports, this once again is the deep dive. It goes a little bit more in depth compared to the phase 1. So after the phase 1 comes and it raises some eyebrows and you got some RECs on there, we're going to do a phase 2. Here's where we get really hands-on, literally digging into the soil and the groundwater. We have certified geologists and engineers that come to take the wheel to make sure that we're on point. Sometimes you might even have toxicologists who might join the party, just so they can check to see if there are any health risks lurking around. And what sets a phase 2 ESA apart from phase 1 essentially is their comprehensive approach. They not only present laboratory data, but they also incorporate like site maps, geophysical survey findings, and some radar data. Essentially, you can call it a multifaceted strategy, and it allows for a thorough assessment of potential contamination risks on the property. Sometimes in your CRE transactions, it might be prudent for you to get a phase 2 report in tandem with a phase 1 report. And this is typically seen more common in properties with elevated contamination risks, such as, gas stations or dry cleaning facilities. Because if you already know you have a property that historically housed some of these types of businesses, more often than not, you're going to get a phase 2 anyways. And to get the phase 2 in tandem with the phase 1, it's going to shorten that time frame for you. You're going to see a range of tests and surveys that are tailored to the specific attributes of each site. These assessments are all about digging deeper to uncover potential environmental risks, both literally and figuratively. So your EP or your professional dude is going to grab some ground samples and he's going to analyze them for any signs of trouble. They're going to do also soil gas testing. They're going to pull some air samples from the ground, and the idea is to sniff out if any sneaky vapors or gases that were hiding below the surface and or have escaped. They're going to do some groundwater testing. They're going to scoop up some water samples and they're going to check them for any issues. They're also going to do some geophysical surveys. They're going to use some fancy techs, and it's pretty much like having x-ray glasses. They're going to look for hidden tanks, utility lines, and they're trying to make sure that nothing below the surface stays a secret. And after they do all their testing, they're going to wrap up the whole story. Each test and survey are going to play a role. They're going to reveal the bigger picture of the site's environmental condition. It's pretty much like connecting the dots, if you will. And as you can imagine, in a phase 2, with all the testing that's involved, it's going to take a little bit longer than your phase 1 studies. It could take a few weeks, could even take a couple of months, and they're going to be a little bit more expensive than your phase 1s. And lastly, we have phase 3 reports. So when phase 2 ESAs start to wave the red flag that something is up, that's when the phase 3 ESAs step in. These are like your badass, more strapped up detectives who are going deep into the details of contamination. They're going to be figuring out how bad it actually is, and they're going to figure out how to keep those risks in check. The mission here for phase 3 reports is to gather more data and really get what's going on with the contamination. This approach or this study is a little bit more hands-on. It's going to include a blend of field investigations, another blend of lab analysis, and risk assessments. You're probably going to see more or additional rounds of sampling. Like they're probably going to need to gather more soil, more groundwater, and maybe even more gas samples or soil gas samples. And they might even install some stuff on your piece of land, like special monitoring wells to closely track the movement of any types of contaminants. And then, these samples are going to be taken back to the laboratories and to be studied on and to determine if the concentrations of those contaminants are going to be harmful in any way or problematic in any way. The critical component here is risk assessments. Your environmental EPs are also going to evaluate the potential adverse effects of contamination on both the environment and humans. That means you and me. This includes, examining factors like toxicity, potential exposure routes for people or ecosystems, and all the affected parties that could be involved. And once again, like the phase 1 and the phase 2, you're going to get a comprehensive report. It's probably going to be 10 times as long. These reports are already long as hell, and this is going to be the ultimate guidebook for everyone involved. Property owners, regulators, or anyone that's curious on what's inside these reports. You're going to find the whole story. You're going to find the journey. You're going to find the lab results. You're going to find the risk assessments and pretty much the game plan for fixing things up. And depending on the situation, your phase 3 can be done in as little as a day, even though I haven't seen it done that quickly, to, probably several months. It could probably even take years, depending on the extent of that contamination. And as you can imagine, it gets a little bit more detailed and the costs go up dramatically. And there you have it. That is your little overview of the environmental site assessments or environmental studies. These are super important to figure out whether or not your dirt or your property is healthy, because at the end of the day, it's going to be a bitch to clean up if there are any issues. So it's, in my opinion, paying for these studies is worth it, just to make sure you're not buying something that had something that you're not expecting. And until next time, Wonton out. And that's a wrap. If you've made it this far, that means you've listened to the entire episode, so thank you. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please leave a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening from. And if you've learned something or found it useful, share it with one of your homies. And if you want to get in touch with me, I'm pretty active on IG. My handle is pro_TANH. Reach out, let me know what you liked, what you didn't like, or what you want to hear about in the future. I'm here to tailor this to you. Until next time.